the UK mainland and Northern Ireland after the government published details of its deal with the Democratic Unionist Party today. The agreement sets the stage for the return of power sharing at Stormont after the DUP withdrew almost 2 years ago. The new deal will also see a package of more than £3 billion to support public services in Northern Ireland, and is expected to be debated in Parliament tomorrow, with the Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris saying it will bring the UK together.
It is time to build on the progress of the last 25 years. Today, we have presented a plan which will deliver the long-term change that Northern Ireland needs. It will strengthen Northern Ireland's place in our union and guarantee the free flow of goods across the entire United Kingdom. And it's only by sticking to this plan that we will become a more united and prosperous country together.
Labour has said it'll set out its plans to renationalise Britain's railways next month. The party announced the news last year, but speaking exclusively to GB News earlier, the Shadow Transport Secretary said the public will find out more detail on the plans in 2 or 3 weeks' time.
We've got a plan to fix the railways as a whole, which involves bringing operators into public ownership. But that will actually bring significant savings. Our railways are really wasteful at the moment because they're so fractured. I'll be setting out plans actually in just 2 or 3 weeks' time that will demonstrate how we'll save money and how that money can be reinvested into the railways. To bring those operators into public ownership. All of them, absolutely, within the first term of a Labour government.
The Home Secretary conceded today the number of asylum seekers likely to be sent to Rwanda under the government's £240 million scheme could actually be quite low. Answering questions at the Home Affairs Select Committee this morning, James cleverly admitted he couldn't say how many of the 33,000 asylum seekers identified as eligible would eventually be sent to Rwanda. The government's attempting to pass legislation deeming Rwanda a safe country. The bill's currently making its way through the House of Lords. Meanwhile, GB News understands several illegal migrants have been rescued after their boat got into difficulties in the English Channel this morning. They were trying to cross from France in poor weather conditions. And we understand 4 boats were trying to make the crossing with 200 people on board. They were brought ashore to Dover by Border Force vessels. So far this year, around 1,200 migrants have made the crossing. That's roughly the same number as this time last year. Nicola Sturgeon said today her biggest regret during the pandemic was not locking down sooner. The former First Minister gave evidence at the COVID inquiry, and she also admitted deleting WhatsApp messages. But she insisted she acted in line with Scottish Government policy. Ms Sturgeon appeared emotional at times as she recounted that part of her wished she hadn't been First Minister when the pandemic took hold. The man shot dead by police in London yesterday after breaking into a home armed with a crossbow was a convicted stalker. Bryce Hodgson had been convicted of stalking, including entering a woman's bedroom without consent. The 30-year-old was also under a 5-year restraining order that banned him from entering the street where he was threatening people. The government's refused to rule out relying on imported steel after the planned closure of blast furnaces at Port Talbot in Wales. Executives from Tata Steel were being questioned by MPs in Westminster today about the plans, which puts nearly 3,000 jobs at risk. The company says it's moving to the more environmentally friendly production of steel, which requires fewer staff. But it's infuriated steel workers, many of whom staged protests outside Parliament this morning, warning of the impact on the lives of local community members and the wider Welsh economy. And lastly, the Queen was greeted by members of the public, wishing the King a speedy recovery today as she visited a hospital in London. Queen Camilla was visiting the charity Maggie's, which supports cancer patients in 24 centres across the UK. Her Majesty was at the Royal Free and has been president of the charity since 2008, and it's her first visit to one of the centres since she became Queen. Those are the latest news stories. Full background on all of them by heading to our website, gbnews.com, where you can also sign up for free GB News alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me is my panel, the Conservative peer in the House of Lords, Jacqueline Foster, and the former Labour Party advisor, Matt Larser. Hello to both of you guys. I saw in the headlines there as well, Polly Middlehurst, she was referencing Nicola Sturgeon at the COVID inquiry. Was you watching? Did you see it?
The pandemic struck. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been, but I was, and I wanted to be the best First Minister I could be during that period. It's for others to judge the extent to which I succeeded.
Yeah, she was almost in tears, is how it's been described, when she was asked, do you ever wish that you weren't the First Minister? I've got to say, looking at my inbox, because I mentioned that I might reference this, lots of you have been in touch saying that wish that she wasn't the First Minister was shared by many of you. I could tell you that. Matt Larser, what did you make to that?
So, I mean, I think, you know, she was clearly very emotional there, but it's quite hard. If you wish you weren't, you didn't have to be. You didn't have to be First Minister. You didn't have to go for the top job. If you're going to go for the top job in politics, you need to want it, and you need to be prepared to be held to account of it, which I think she's worried the COVID inquiry is going to do.
What do you make to it, Jacqueline?
Well, she deleted all the WhatsApp messages.
Well,
so I'm not surprised she was feeling a bit tearful. I think having sort of derided everything that our government did during COVID. So, you know, there's an inquiry, it needs to be sorted out.
Yeah, and
I'm afraid I don't have much sympathy. As has just been said, nobody makes you go into politics. Nobody makes you, you know, become First Minister or whatever it is.
This whole WhatsApp thing, I've got to say, this is for me where the COVID inquiry is really falling on its backside, because it's not focusing on the right things, if you ask me. It's not about who WhatsApped who kept which WhatsApps, who could, what's the word when she was saying that they weren't retained or whatever it was, and then actually, yeah, there was probably deleted. Funny how there's some people lose certain WhatsApp messages and then seem to miraculously be able to access other ones when it suits them, to be able to provide them to other inquiries previously when things are perhaps a different subject, isn't it? But anyway...
But the judge demanded that Boris Johnson and everybody else made sure they had the WhatsApp messages.
And now they've done it, just all politicians have moved to Signal, or other ones that auto-delete.
Yeah, I just feel this whole COVID inquiry...
But you're right, because it's lost its focus.
Yeah.
People want to know what happened and what can we do next time.
Yeah.
Most countries have taken about a year at max to decide what they would have done better and the steps that they'd take in the future. This is like a goodness knows what. It's going to go on for years.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I'm not really interested in who fell out with who and who called who which name and who struggled with which bit of pressure at what point in time and who was creating these fake decision groups here, there and everywhere. Because let's face it, none of those people will likely be in power again if indeed there is a next pandemic. So what I want to know is, were you indeed right to even have locked us down? Never mind, did you do it at this point or that point? Should you have ever have locked us down in the first place, i.e. should we do it again? I would argue probably not. And all these things like making children, yes, children, sit in masks for hours and hours and hours on end, those kind of things, should we be avoiding going forward? I would argue yes. So pack it in with a tittle-tattle over your WhatsApp, if you don't mind. Anyway, you can get in touch with me about whatever is on your mind tonight, quite frankly. Let's have a free-flowing conversation. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, tell me. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you get hold of me, or you can tweet me, X me, at GBNews. I also, as well, want to speak about Martin Bashir. Did you see that story? Apparently, it was racism and jealousy that led to the criticism of his Diana interview. What do you make to that? We'll come on to that before the end of the programme. But for now, it's a big day today, everybody. Do you know why? Actually, it's one of my regular viewers' birthdays. I must remember. I'll find your name and I'll give you a shout-out before the end of the programme, I promise. But that's not what I was referring to. I was referring to the fact that today is 4 years to the day since we left the European Union. I'm interested. I'm showing on the screen. This was kind of like a celebration type event around Parliament Square. I was there. I was actually on the stage for a small part of that. I've got to tell you, people were absolutely elated. You can see how far and wide that kind of gathering was. I'm sure certain news programmes or news channels would say there was about 100 people there or whatever it is. They describe these crowd sizes when it suits them. But anyway, people were very happy. But fast forward to now, 4 years on, Jacqueline, do you think that Brexit has been a success or not?
Well, I think it's too simplistic to say something being successful or unsuccessful. Brexit was always going to be a long haul. I mean, I was one of those people that supported it. I was also one of those people who spent 20 years in Brussels, 15 of those in the European Parliament, responsible for making a lot of that legislation. I mean, there are, 58,000 acts of Parliament that came through that are having to be looked at. But no, it was never going to be a quick process. I think, sadly, what did stall it, unfortunately, in terms of trying to get things sorted out to a degree, was COVID. And then, obviously, that's been exacerbated with Ukraine. But if you look at the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, that was done 4 years ago. And there have been hold-ups. There have been hold-ups for our traders, for example, getting stuff into the EU, which need not have happened. I think the relationship, or the reality now, certainly when I speak to colleagues who are still in the European Parliament and the Commission, there's a lot of hostility there towards us, has improved, and there's a reality check. We're all working together. We still have 40% of our trade with the EU, about 38% across all of Europe. So it's a hugely important market, and it is extremely important to us, and we do recognise that.
You are, or you were, a Remainer.
I was on. I remember that night because, to be fair, it was a big crowd. But I went to a Metropolitan Elite wake for leaving the EU, and then went on to a club night, which was commiserating the leaving of the EU. I mean, look,
are you over it now?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't think we're going to about to rejoin. I'm not one of those Romaniacs who I don't stand outside Parliament with an EU flag. But I do think that it's been a disaster for the country, and I think it's particularly been a disaster because the things that we were promised that were the benefits of Remain, like taking back control of our borders, we've had exactly the reverse of what we were promised. So we've seen immigration go up, not down. Mm-hmm. We've seen, now they're lost opportunities that the government has failed to take, and that's what really disappoints me. And I find actually when I talk to people that it's not just people like me who were campaigning for Remain on the day of the referendum, which is etched in my memory, but people who were passionate leavers who feel that what we were promised hasn't been delivered. So I don't think that it's been a success.
But they're two different things, though, aren't they? So someone voting for the sovereignty and for the rights for our government to determine our immigration policy, that is one thing. The government's ability or will or whatever they do with that sovereignty when it comes to determining that immigration policy is a separate thing.
Yeah, that is true. And obviously you could say we could shut the government out now that we have sovereignty back. But we've lost such huge things. One of the big impacts on our economy has been on the labour shortage that we've had. And one of the great things about being in the EU was that freedom of movement meant that, yes, people came to work, some people stayed, but millions of people came for short periods and went back home. And we've seen that lost opportunity. But instead we've seen 800,000 a year.
Yeah, but
net migration.
Yeah, but I need to intervene here because even if we'd have still been in the European Union, and illegal immigration, I agree with everybody who's watching this, we're all up to here with the whole thing, frankly. It wouldn't have been any different at all.
But legal migration.
In addition, in terms of, we registered about about 5 million EU citizens were registered. We did it very quickly for them. We made sure people were staying here. So in terms of the job market and then who you're looking for to fill your vacancies, I don't think that was directly related to Brexit. There were other things that came in, like COVID, where there was a restriction on travel and
COVID complicated
things.
It, sure.
And I think we just need to be grown up about this because we have, massive business with the rest of the world. We have a high amount of immigration where people come from third countries. We only have to look at our own public services, like the NHS. So I think it just needs to be kept into context. I'd like to see reductions in red tape. I'd like to see things much smoother, running much smoother. And I think that everybody needs to have a grown-up conversation. Our relationship isn't terrible with EU or Europe.
No.
We have a relationship, but what I am saying is if we'd still been in the EU, the issues and challenges that we all have on fuel prices, on illegal immigration, they are as bad or worse when you go and speak to somebody in Italy.
On illegal migration, yeah. We've now got the highest legal
situations that they have, and we're all having to deal with this.
Yeah.
I would like to see the left or the Labour Party and others in this country, and certainly in Parliament, who have tried to stop practically every piece of legislation we have been trying to put through to stop the illegal immigration.
Well, we differ on the plan because
Labour's
got its own
plan. A reality check, because we have Thousands and thousands. We've had 1,000 in January of young men predominantly, and this is just January, who've come in illegally.
Absolutely. I think we both want to end it.
They have no papers. We have a security issue.
Yeah, but he's not on about illegal immigration.
I'm about legal migration is higher than it's ever been. And
I don't disagree.
And the government has its hands on those levers.
And this is why they're also tackling now the dependents from the student
after the horse has bolted,
which in my view...
the numbers have arrived.
I don't disagree on that because it was absolutely ridiculous. I didn't even realise that. If you're a student, why would you need to bring all dependents? You go and do your course and then you probably go back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Unless you've got a job, and then that's a different arrangement with the business you're going to.
Yeah, I think on the so-called Brexit dividend. Now we've seen. I mean, it may be the right thing to do to get settlement in Northern Ireland, but effectively we're going to be adopting all EU laws across most sectors. So actually, it seems that it's been a very expensive, very pointless exercise.
Don't forget, there's a lot of EU laws that are in place that we will not need to change. I've specialised in the aviation and aerospace markets, maritime. These are international...
Absolutely. But you're at the sensible end. We were told by other people that it was going to be a bonfire of these EU laws.
Lots of people are sensible, actually. But it transcends so many areas. And but there are areas that we need to tweak, that we need to change. And I accept that. But, Kemi Badenoch actually did a very good interview at the weekend. And as she said, there is legislation in place. Of course, we're not going to change.
Yeah, but some of the Brexiteers are angry because they think they haven't had their bonfire of regulations on one side. They're not sure anybody's happy.
Depends who you talk to, in actual fact. But we need to be optimistic.
We're making you sign.
We are moving forward.
Yeah, well, I wonder what you make to it at home. Do you sit there and think it was a great idea? Was it all worth it? What price was too high for you to pay? Mandy, she says, can you say hello to us and hello to Pete? They voted Brexit. They've retired now to Greece. She said, we voted Brexit, even though she knew that for those guys personally, it might have been easier for them to vote Remain because it might have made their life better. But she says she doesn't regret it at all. Anne says, I've got no regrets about leaving the EU. It's just a pity that the government didn't make the most of it. Rob says Brexit is a good thing, but it would have been better if we had a decent government. Pete, you're an optimistic chap, Pete. I'll have a bit of what you're drinking tonight. You say Brexit was the best thing to happen to this country since we came out of World War II. I've got to say, this sentiment is coming through thick and fast, which is all about you think that Brexit as a principle was the right idea and the thing that you voted for, but I really am getting a sense that people are frustrated with the way it's being implemented, or some would argue perhaps not, by the current government. Get in touch at GBViews at GBnews.com is how you get hold of me. I'm fascinated on your thoughts on that. Also, after the break, I want to talk to you about benefits and whether or not we're too generous. Leslie has said, I'm furious at GB News. I've got serious health conditions and you keep attacking benefits all of the time. Let's just be clear. What I want to talk to you about is people that can work but that are on benefits. And I want to look at the amount of benefits that are being paid out. So, Leslie, don't worry, I'm not focusing on you. I'll see you all after 2.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, We'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Kerr on GB News until 7 o'clock tonight. We've just been pondering Brexit 4 years on since we actually left and how you feel about it. I've got to say, Peter says fishing. So many people have overlooked the impact on fishing, what we were promised versus what has happened since. Pete says pretty much that is nothing short of a bit of a national scandal. Neil says we were lied to. We were told the government and civil service would respect the vote. They absolutely did not respect it. He says the out-of-touch elite have treated the voting public with contempt. That's Neil in Guildford there. Clive says, why are Remainers who still moan about Brexit still living here if the EU is so wonderful? Why don't they move there?
We're not allowed anymore because of Brexit.
Yes, you are. Who's this today?
Yes, you are.
Oh, I mean, there you go. Wouldn't you seek methods and ways and means to move to the EU then, Matt?
No, because I love my country and I'm very happy here. And I do accept the result. I don't think we're going to rejoin anytime soon. And Labour will certainly pledge that we'll remain out in the next manifesto.
Well, Denise, she says, not only did I vote Brexit, I canvassed, I walked the streets delivering leaflets, etc. She said, I don't regret anything, but I'm fuming with how the government has handled it all. It's them that is to blame. I found that really interesting about how that will play out in the next election, because, of course, 2019, it was centred a lot, wasn't it, around Brexit and all the rest of it. So I wonder, fast forward to the next election, just how many people will vote on that basis alone, that actually they feel that Brexit wasn't successfully delivered.
Yeah, and don't forget, we had the Labour Party calling for a second referendum. I mean,
no longer.
Maybe no longer. But when you're talking about stalling things and trying to move things forward, when you've got, a major opposition party and many MPs who fought tooth and nail to actually stop it going ahead following a referendum. I mean, it was absolutely appalling, frankly.
Yeah, and by the way, when you say they're not calling for a referendum any longer, I'm not sure I believe that there's much genuity in that, because I'm sure that right now, in the here and now, desperately trying to get into the next election, I'm sure that they're not calling for one right this moment in time. But I wouldn't put it past people, if indeed they do win the next election, to start slipping us into that direction, because who sticks to their manifesto promises?
I think that would be so central that they would stick to it. I think there would be an interesting question would be what would happen in 5 years' time about the election after that, particularly as we've seen generational change and the sort of people who voted to remain will be bigger in the Labour Party, but absolutely not for the next Parliament.
Time will tell. What do you make to it all, guys? Over to you for the final word on that one. Now, let's talk benefits, shall we? Because a report has come out now that says a family living in benefits on London could be financially better off than a household earning £70,000 a year. This is about analysis that's been done for the Centre for Social Justice, basically, in the Telegraph as well, looking into that. Leslie, one of my viewers, got in touch at the start saying she's got ill health and she feels that there's a lot of benefit bashing going on. And I want to make this clear. If you need support, if you physically cannot work in this country, absolutely there should be a safety net to help you. That is literally what the welfare state is for. But when you start hearing, actually, people saying that you can earn more, and I use that term loosely, in benefits, than a household earning £70,000, something's not quite right there, is it?
Well, it's not been right, actually. This creep started about 30 years ago. And a lot of the problem is also housing benefit, particularly when you're looking in places like London. I mean, they're paying out for people in London. I'm not talking about our viewer, obviously, that has come in here. You know, £1,000 a week in rent. It's just absolutely, it's exorbitant. And the whole point of the welfare system was to basically be a hand up. It was supposed to protect those who were most vulnerable. It was supposed to protect those, obviously, they had children or there were families with disabilities. Also, you lost your job, you're made redundant. We need to make sure that there's something in place, to make sure people then got the next foothold to get a job. And sadly, I'm afraid it's, in my view, it's been going on a long time and there's a huge amount of abuse in it. And so people like Leslie and others, you know, I'd like to put up the state pension, for example. I'd like to give higher benefits for those who will never be able to work and are in very, very dire circumstances. But there's the amount of fraud in the system as well is absolutely enormous. So I don't think anybody's got a real grip of this yet, including us, and I don't think, you know, any incoming Labour government, whenever or if ever they come in, I'll try everything to do to stop them. I think they'll find this a bigger challenge than anybody.
I think it's certainly a huge challenge in the welfare system. But and you're absolutely right, Jacqueline, that the issue with housing benefit is because of the shortage of social housing. The government is subsidising the private rented sector to such an extent that in places like London with very high rents, that bill is huge. So one of the key things is we need to build more social housing so that the government is saving money on paying out for private landlords in areas of very high demand.
Who should have that social housing? Because I find it fascinating. They've got a Labour MP earning about just shy of 90 grand a year in social housing. Yeah,
I mean, obviously nobody on 90 grand a year gets social housing at the, you know, they start in social housing then. There are a couple of Labour MPs who do live in social housing because they were on low incomes before they became MPs, and once you're in it, you stay in it. Now, there is a question whether sort of tenancies for life in today's world are still appropriate. So that's a debate that can be had.
Do you think they are? Do you think that if you're earning 90 grand a year, and I'm not going to make this a bashing on a Labour MP.
No, I think...
It's not about that. It's about, I don't care who you are, quite frankly.
Yeah.
If you're getting 90 grand a year when the average salary in this country is like 30 odd, should you then be taking up a house that is reserved for people that apparently can't afford to get their own?
I think morally, if I was the MPs concerned, I wouldn't stay in social housing once my income had gone to that stage. Absolutely fine if they were in it for they had need. Clearly, people on 90 grand a year don't have needs. There's a strong case that they should perhaps be leaving that social housing, get themselves on the property ladder.
Listen, if somebody's been a member of Parliament for 12 months or you know, you don't stay in flats like that. You've also got an issue as well. This is where illegal immigration and various bad immigration policy comes in, because where there is social housing, we have people who've waited genuinely on lifts, families who've then had a child or two children, waiting years. Then we have people appear in the UK, and the next thing they're given flats and they're given houses.
Well, partly to temper that, Gordon Brown brought in a policy of local people being favoured.
It's not, I mean, we need the private sector to make sure there is rented accommodation. But the reality is, if you separate London out from the rest of the country, because it is pretty distinctive, going back to what Michelle said, the amount of money you're having to earn to actually to be worse off than getting benefits. This is completely the wrong
Absolutely, and we need to sort that out within the universal credit system. So if there are crazy things in it, they need to be stopped, because work should pay more than benefits.
And the million people who are actually, you know, of working age, they need to be, you know, there are job vacancies.
But I think it's important, as Leslie said, that we don't get into a culture of benefit bashing, but we get into a culture of making sure that benefits are effective and dealing with the need that there is.
Going to those who we know.
I agree, and we need more welfare to work programmes. The government hasn't done enough on welfare to work.
We've done loads of them, but we know that there are endemic problems here, and trying to deal with them is a nightmare, because as soon as we raise it, then you're seen as being cruel and
well, I think we can do more on work, because we've got to, and I think it's going to be a real big priority if Labour comes into power, because people who need support into work need to be given it, because we need to make sure that people in the working age, if they're able to work, are working.
Yeah, I've got to say as well, this whole benefits bucket, because it is just a bucket, isn't it? And people shove everything in there. A lot of people will put pensions in that benefit bucket, and a lot of people go, whoa, there, Tiger, a pension, state pension is not a benefit. People have chipped in and they've paid for that, thank you very much. So people don't like that. But also, it must be so frustrating if you are like Leslie, or if you're someone who physically, you can't work. I don't know, you might even be caring for someone else full-time and therefore you can't work. To be tarred with this same brush.
Absolutely. That's why the tone of the debate is so important, as you say, so that we don't, you know, I think we should be proud that people who need benefits get them, but we should work with those who don't need to be on benefits to get them back into work.
Yeah, you get people with disabled children going through hoops to try and make sure that they're getting the correct benefits. And we have got people, I know people who have spent their entire lives and they've never had a job.
And they need to be targeted with welfare to work.
They were perfectly fit to work. And it's just, it's outrageous, frankly.
I think we agree.
Well, there you go. I think, you know, that whole benefits, the welfare state, that is literally, you could literally just fill programmes on those topics alone, everything from the pittance that is carers allowance to who should be getting social housing, how much should benefits be, what should be classed as a benefit. Literally, we could do a programme just on that. But I'm sure you will not be backwards in coming forwards, telling me your thoughts on it all. But also, did you see the news today, Martin Bashir? So basically, lots of emails have been released now, lots of them redacted. But a part of these emails was Martin Bashir basically saying that lots of the kind of criticism and controversy, etc., surrounding his interview with Princess Diana was blamed by him on professional jealousy and, you guessed it, racism. What do you make to that, Jacqueline?
Oh, you couldn't really make it up, could you? I mean, we now come out with excuses now that he thinks he's been penalised because of racism. I mean, it really is, it takes the biscuit. What we do know is that misinformation, he gave, apparently, and the BBC have echoed this, there was misinformation that was given out to Princess Diana. She did an interview in the, shortest terms, and she was basically fibbed to, and it was totally unacceptable.
Well, up next is Nigel Farage, as you'll be aware, at 7 o'clock. In a second, he'll be joining me. I will ask his opinion any moment now on Martin Bashir. I'm fascinated. Nigel, I think you're there. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Nigel. Yeah, well, Martin Bashir behaved terribly, and the BBC are doing their best to cover it all up. But I'm going to be talking, like you, about the 4th anniversary of Brexit, a night I remember in Parliament Square very well, on the very same day that the Home Affairs Select Committee met. And it was really interesting that the boss, the senior civil servant of the Home Office, was asked, since the Illegal Migration Act of July last year, how many people that across the English Channel have, as the legislation been promised, as it absolutely promised, been denied the asylum process? And the answer is 0. So it all plays into, are we satisfied with the Brexit that we've got? And the answer is, not many of us are.
I can tell you now, I've been asking my viewers that, and it won't surprise you, Nigel, that the answer to that from so many people, as you've highlighted yourself, is a big, fat no to that. Anyway, they won't be backwards in coming forward telling you what they think. I'm sure they'll see you at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much for that. Martin Bashir, then. So what do you think?
Well, I worked in BBC Current Affairs in the department that Martin Bashir worked in, and I think, look, he's taking the biscuit to come out in 2020 once he'd been found bank to rights about having made up the bank statements, etc. So I think it's a bit late to be doing it. I think that he may be motivated because he may have thought the only way to get on in the BBC was to take risks, to cut corners, because it was so posh. I mean, I remember we stood in BBC Current Affairs once when Downton Abbey was on, and I said, who would be upstairs and who would be downstairs? And I was the only one who would be downstairs because they were all so posh public school kids. So, I mean, but that's not an excuse, but that's what I think may have been his kind of feeling, that if you weren't part of one of the clans, one of the posh families who worked in the BBC, then you wouldn't get on. But it's not fair to say that to blame people. He must be responsible for his own mistake.
Yeah, and I've got got to say, I found this whole race thing, you know, when people just say, oh, they're doing this because they're racist or because I'm not white, or I found it a little bit pathetic, actually. Maybe they're criticising you because you did something.
Well, it's just tough, because one of the people I work with is a guy called Mehdi Hassan, who was a researcher with me, for me, and now he earns millions of dollars a year on American telly. So it wasn't, you know, and so it was pretty diverse. That wasn't the issue. It was diverse in terms of race. The biggest thing that came out when the staff were asked at the BBC is it wasn't diverse in terms of background, in terms of, like, you know, class background and economic background that you grew up in. So that was the thing that BBC staff said themselves should be addressed most. So I think it's a bit much for him to claim it was all racism.
Of course, the BBC have said that any suggestion that it's acted in bad faith was, I quote, simply wrong. There you go. I want to talk to you about healthcare as well after the break. Pharmacists now have new powers to prescribe drugs for 7 common ailments. Do you know what those 7 common ailments are or not? What do you think to this? Is this a revolutionary way to help take the pressures off GP? We've got to say, many places, they've been doing this for quite some time now. What do you make to it all? See you in 2.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, alongside me, Conservative peer in the House of Lords, Jacqueline Foster, and a former Labour Party advisor, Matt Larser. Kevin says, Michelle, that young lady on your panel should swap places with Rishi Sunak.
Oh.
Oh,
me too. That's
a
nice,
good idea.
isn't it? Yeah, there you go. There you go. What do you think, Jacqueline Foster for PM? Would you support that or not? Anyway, from today, prescriptions for 7 conditions. I don't know why I'm chuckling because they're not funny conditions. There's just something about having to go to a pharmacy and describe your ailments in front of a queue of random people if they don't have the private rooms. I don't know why. It just makes me like, ooh, a little bit. Anyway, this is happening now in England. You wouldn't have to go and see the doctor. You'd be able to get, for example, things like antibiotics from that pharmacist. Apparently, it's going to free up 10 million GP appointments. They're there or thereabouts. Are you a fan of this, Jacqueline?
I don't know why we haven't done it before. If you're on the continent and you need an antibiotic, you go and see the pharmacist. They will have a good chat with you. And so you have not necessarily needed a prescription to get a drug from a pharmacist. And our pharmacists, I think, are trained very well. They know more about the drugs that they actually pop over the counter than doctor friends of mine. So they know far more about all of this than us. I have a flu jab normally. When I get a flu jab, I go to the chemist, just make an appointment because it's so easy to do. And equally, they're not going to be handing any of these drugs out sort of willy-nilly. The pharmacist, they do have a chat, and most people, they'll go to the pharmacist now with an ailment, and he or she might say, well, look, you should see a GP. Or they'll say, well, actually, let's try this. We've got this over the counter. But that brings me then to the drugs that we actually make sure that you have a prescription for. There are drugs, some of these that are, that outline these ailments, and they should not necessarily be on prescription. It should be, the pharmacist should be allowed to sell them.
Yeah. And by the way,
it's the pharmacist that actually determines that that's what you need.
And to be clear, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, they have already been doing this. So why on earth it has taken England so long to catch up is beyond me.
Well, I agree with Jackie absolutely that why haven't we done this before? But I also think that you're right, that it's. I think we need to make sure that our pharmacists have the capacity to do this. I mean, I have to say, my local pharmacy, the treatment room has actually got boxes in it. So I hope they clear the boxes out if they're going to be prescribing more treatments, because I don't want to be standing there while people using, people coming in for their methadone, which it also dishes out, describing my my ailments. So I think, yes, we need to see. It's a great idea pharmacists step up, but we need to make sure that they introduce new ways of doing it, because I don't want to be standing in the middle of the pharmacy talking about my problems.
There'll be some sweeteners to help enable people, pharmacists, to do this, because apparently they'll get £2,000 each. They'll get £15 per consultation, plus £1,000 a month if they see a minimum number of patients as well. So I've got to say, the incentives
to get the boxes out of the treatment room.
Boxes shifted out of that treatment room. I can see them. And they'll be having the Chuckle Brothers from me to you, from me to you. That have been doing it quite some time.
They do it now, the ones that do the jabs.
Yes.
Because they get paid a fee. Obviously for the COVID or whatever.
Totally, yeah.
And so they clear the boxes out.
I mean, I get conjunctivitis a lot. It used to be ridiculous that you used to have to go to a GP who'd see you for 15 seconds, look at your eyes, say you've got it, and send you to send you with a prescription. Totally sensibly, about a decade ago or more, the same medication the pharmacist can prescribe. So we've got sensible history on this. As you say, why didn't it happen before?
I wonder, like, when you look at the GP's workload, I noticed this story, I think it was in France, about these robots. They've been using these robots there to help people in a healthcare setting. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. I mean, I don't know why, when I see these kind of robots that are made to look like humans, there's something about them that freak me out a little bit. Anyway, it's all about helping patients, elderly perhaps, in hospitals with their form fillings and some of their testing and whatever. Is that our future?
Well, I mean, I think this is a long way off this being rolled out, but I think that certainly the healthcare system needs to embrace tech more where it's appropriate. I mean, the NHS is still the only user in the country of fax machines, which sort of depresses me hugely. So I think yes to tech where it works, no to depersonalising the system, and I think it'll be a while since we get those robots.
Would you be a fan of those robots, Jacqueline?
To a degree, I certainly would. And, of course, those that need help in the home. I mean, have a robot, make sure it cooks your dinner, make sure it does the washing and ironing. They need to make sure it's programmed properly. I mean, it won't literally do all of that. But when you've got people who need a bit of care, they need a bit of assistance, and they will maybe only have a carer come in once a day or something. I mean, this is where technology can work really
why don't
well.
we use robot hoovers? I mean, I have to say, first robot hoover I ever saw was at the house of a GB News presenter who was shouting at it for not doing a good enough job. She better remain nameless.
I wonder which GB News presenter has got one of the... I can tell you now, I once... I got it from my partner, actually, as a present for his birthday, and he was livid. It was a hoover and a mopper all in one.
Oh,
but it just... Yeah, but it left the floor soaking wet, so I sent it back. Long story short, the company offered me a free replacement, and then I got freaked out because I thought, why are you offering me a free hoover? And then I was convinced that it was a Chinese spark, this hoover, so I was like, thank you very much, no thank you. So it never...
But this GB News presenter was being very firm with the robot hoover that it wasn't doing a good enough job.
Oh, well, there you go. You can all put your thinking caps on and wonder which GB News presenter, female presenter, kicks off a robot hoover. I can assure you it's definitely not me. Anyway, you know, company. What about company for the elderly? Well, not just elderly, lonely people. AI and robots and all the rest of it. That could be a good use for them, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Have someone to pass the time of day with you again or not? Your thoughts on it all, get in touch and let me know. I'll be bringing you into the conversation after the break, and I also want to ask you as well about XL bully dogs. Of course, the ban comes into play imminently. Is it strict enough or not?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Matthew Laza and Baroness Jacqueline Foster remain alongside me. That conversation there about the robotic hoovers didn't half spark a strange conversation in that break, I can tell you now. I've just been listening to someone saying that they wash their bed sheets twice a week. What? I mean,
Crazy.
Who even does such a thing? Anyway, all of your strange domestic habits, I shall park them for now because there are other matters that I want to discuss with you. The deadline to apply for an exemption certificate for XL bully dogs has ended today. After that, it'll basically be a criminal offence to be in possession of one of those dogs without the certificate. What do you make to this, Jacqueline? Is this ban, some people are saying it's not been strict enough?
I think any government would have been between a bit of a rock and a hard place. And there was a limited time to do something. And I think they've also tried to, and you know I'm a real dog lover. And
you are, we've seen Lollipop, I remember.
And I was on the animal welfare end. But I'm equally, you know, I've had large dogs myself over the decades. And I know what a dog can do if it's out of control and it's not trained. And unfortunately, there's always a small group that are that cause the problems, but this particular breed is extremely powerful, far more powerful than most. So I think the decision to make sure that your dog is registered, it is muzzled, obviously it's not allowed to breed, you're not allowed to breed from it, I think is actually the right way forward. Great. I think what's really tragic, what we are seeing is these horrible people, the RSPCA and others are picking up basically carcasses of young bullies who've been, you know, beaten to death on the head and stuff, left by bins, and all of this sort of thing. You know, if they can't keep them, they have to be given over to vets or to the authorities, and they have to be euthanised. I mean, it just has to happen.
One thing was Scotland wasn't going to introduce the ban, and then there was very insistent there wasn't a problem in Scotland. And then guess what? People have been taking them north of the border, so now Scotland is looking at introducing a ban. The RSPCA and others are worrying that the ban won't be effective because the worst owners won't register and will just ignore it. But I was struck reading about this that vets do not have to tell the authorities if they encounter an unregistered XL bully, which is really weird because GPs have to communicate things like, you know, measles or some stomach upsets, etc., communicable diseases. You have the responsibility to report that to the authorities. Why don't vets have responsibility to report a dog that should be registered and isn't to the authorities? Because that's in every animal's interest, surely.
I think there could be a way to do it because you chip animals and they're often taken to somebody's vets if it's lost. I think they probably need to have a conversation with the vets.
Charlie on Twitter, he says the XL bully ban has been horrendous. It's ill thought out and poorly instigated. He says the RSPCA has always maintained that breed-specific legislation does not work. He says all of this is a PR stunt. It's dog owners that we should be licensing, and it's those that are the real monsters, some of those people.
Well, I mean, I'm not particularly a dog person, and I think dog owners need to be aware and slightly less indulgent and aware of the impact their dogs have on them, even if they're much nicer breeds than the XL bully. So, kind of half agree.
Yeah, and I think some people, I mean, I don't have a dog. I would never hurt a dog, I must confess. But there's a lot of people that are dog lovers that love their dog, that think, oh, my dog is really friendly and all the rest of it. But not everyone shares that sentiment. So when you let this so-called friendly dog be bounding around the place, particularly when there's children around...
Exactly. I was really scared of dogs as a kid, so you have to be aware of the impact.
I was too. Karen's just been in touch. You made me sad, Karen. You're saying that actually people that are on benefits, it's not just those that don't work. You're telling me, she says she's 64, she works in a care home, she has to get her wages topped up with universal credit, and she says still, despite all that, she's not been able to put her heating on for 2 years. I have to say, stories like that make me sad, and I also think it is quite reflective of a very broken country when somebody's such as Karen there, you can go to work, you can physically go to work, you can graft, particularly in a sector such as caring, which I don't think we financially value enough.
Absolutely.
And despite all of that, you can still need to get benefits, and despite all of that, you can still be in a situation where you can't put your heating on.
Was she not entitled to some heating allowance because she was on a benefit?
Oh, well, there you go. I don't know. You can have a private session with that.
With the
after the thing.
Advice.
Well, there you go. Baroness Foster says contact Citizens Advice, Karen. You might be able to get extra support that perhaps you are currently not receiving. Louise says, is there a petition for Baroness Foster to be Prime Minister? There are not, actually. Jennifer says on the XL bully ban, these dogs have feelings and they don't deserve any of this. She says, gives examples about some of the horrendous things that some people are doing. But I suspect, Jennifer, if your child was attacked by one of those dogs, maybe you might have a different opinion. That debate will rumble on, but for now, it's all I've got time for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jacqueline, thank you. Doesn't she look glamorous today, everyone, as well?
Certainly does. I feel I've let the side down.
Anyway, look, Nigel Farage is up next. Don't go anywhere. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Good evening. A dry and a bright day for many tomorrow, though certainly in the south a cooler feel. It's been quite mild today. It's also been very, very windy today. Those winds continuing to ease down at the moment. A storm system heading its way to Norway. This weather front's been sinking southwards, bringing a band of rain. Still very blustery in northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. That rain will spread across southern parts of Wales and southern England before tending to fizzle out through the early hours. So most places become dry and clear through the night. Still very blustery though, with showers across the far north. A hint of a touch of frost maybe over parts of the Midlands and central parts of Wales, where we keep the clearer skies. But for most we'll start at about 3 or 4 Celsius in the morning, and for most it's a fine day tomorrow. Early rain over the Channel Islands clearing away. Still plenty of showers in northern Scotland. It's still quite windy here, although the winds will ease for a time before more wet weather then pushes into the Highlands and the Western Isles later on. For most it's dry and bright, hazy sunshine, temperatures lower than today, certainly across the south, 7 to 9 degrees Celsius. Friday will be a very mild day. We will still have outbreaks of rain in western Scotland. Some drizzly conditions over the hills of West England and West Wales at times, but for most, Friday's just dry and cloudy. Quite blustery again, but it will be, as I said, very mild with temperatures in double figures, some places climbing into the teens.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.